Good morning to everybody. Good evening, wherever you might be. Thank you for joining us for this week's SaMMF seminar. We're so excited to have Shouyong Shi from Penn State as our speaker today. What I want to remind everybody of is the format. So there will be, as usual, a video recording of this on our website and on YouTube. There we have invited panelists that will be actively asking questions during the seminar. And let me just quickly give a shout out here to Garth Bauman, Michael Choi, Manolis Galianos, Tanas Michalos, Sergey Glepkin, Kyle Herkenhoff, Philip Kirscher, Ben Lester, Espen Moen, and Derek Stacey. Thank you all so much for joining. And if you are registered for the seminar as an attendee, then you're invited to ask questions using the Zoom raise hand feature or in the Q&A, and we will call on you. Once Shouyong has finished in about an hour, we will invite you to join also a live Q&A open discussion for 15 minutes, or really as long as we all want to go. I also would like to point out that we're going to be having a workshop on the housing market on March the 26th. So please sign up for that and join us then as well. And that's all I have to say. So Shouyong, please share your screen now, and you may start whenever you're ready.
Okay, here's my screen. Okay, so yeah, I would like to thank the organizers for putting this paper on. And also apologize for whoever actually attended a talk about 10 months ago in a SAM conference, because this was the paper presented. And there hasn't been really a lot of new stuff in this paper since my last presentation. So if you want to quit because you already heard it before, then that's okay. Yeah, so the advertised paper had a different title, but that was the original, the first title. It has Aggregate Demand Management, which is a play on Peter Diamond's 1985 paper title. This paper does speak to that issue, but in subsequent version, I just thought, well, maybe change that into equilibrium price dispersion, because that's the first thing to have, which is kind of different from Peter Diamond's paper that did not really have a lot of price dispersion. So let me just directly get into what I'm trying to actually understand, which is this thing I coined, sequentially mixed search, SaMMF, just to be very clear and explicit about what I'm trying to study. I listed this two-stage search process here. So in stage one is directed search. But in contrast to the typical directed search, the search is not really directed by a relationship between the mechanism or price posted by a seller and the associated say meeting probability. The basic idea is that there's some kind of information friction, so people cannot precisely direct the search to each particular seller, but they can direct to, some markets or sub-markets that has a price distribution. There will be a relationship between the price distribution in that sub-market and the meeting probability. So that is the essential feature of directed search. So people would actually select this group of, sellers in this sub-market. But then in the second stage, there is noise matching. So they don't know who they're going to meet in this group of market. More importantly, they may actually get offers from more than one seller. So there will be multiple offers. There will be exposed selection in this sense. In a way, generally described, this process is actually very common, although it does not map exactly, one-to-one into the details of all these examples I listed here. But I'm sure, you search it online, you bought stuff, you can relate to this process. For example, let's say search online. You know what kind of price range you want to have. You basically type in the price range, a whole bunch of stuff showed up. Any question? So a whole bunch of stuff showed up on your screen. And this is like the multiple offer part. Then you select one, yeah? So all of them would actually fit into the description you typed in, like, for example, price range. But price range is one type of description of the submarket that you try to get into. But in general, the description should be just kind of price dispersion. So I'm going to be more precise about exactly what is there and whether you need to have the entire distribution to be involved or not. But at this point, I mean, it's important to have this picture. So there are two stages, but you can't just say all two-stage search processes are sequentially mixed search. I'm going to give you examples about other two-stage search processes that are not, MS. Some of the people are actually here in the audience, so I'm trying to be as explicit as I can. So, housing market is kind of a mixture between this MS and some other kind of process, because in the housing market there could be exposed to bargaining. So what the price that I'm actually speaking to might be more related to the list price rather than the actual transaction price. But you can see, I mean, I don't know. I mean, these days you may actually go on, Zillow to search for houses, whether you search with Zillow or search for other things, especially with the traditional way of searching for houses. Your real estate agent is typically going to ask you what's the price range you're willing to pay. And then she's going to give you a whole bunch of houses that fits into that description. And you may actually see more than one house before actually trying to select one to make an offer. So why is this process, which is supposed to be very common, not analyzed? I mean, just because it's a natural progression of economic theory. We started with, extreme setup. We try to understand them. Once we understand them, we try to, take the next step. The only problem is that a lot of subfields of economics, that next step never happens. People just say, "Oh, we already know these extreme cases, so let's just study other things," pretending that it's actually pretty close to what we're seeing in the markets. So, but in addition to the fact that this process is very common, what can we possibly gain by understanding this process? I mean, I listed two major points here, but you may be able to think about other points. One is this fundamental relationship between efficiency and price dispersion, or more generally, dispersion in mechanisms, in trading mechanisms. So in the canonical directed search, what I meant is that homogeneous people on each side, you don't actually with one match, one meeting per interval of time, you don't get a price dispersion. That's purely directed search. There's no dispersion in posted mechanisms. So I'm actually more general here by using the word mechanism rather than prices, because there are directed search models that allow, let's say, the sellers to post auction mechanisms. There, the dispersion doesn't exist between different auctions. In the equilibrium, you see one type of auction being posted. So if you think about narrowing in terms of posted price, well, for example, the paper I wrote with Kim Bedett and Randy Wright on JP, there was only one price showing up in the equilibrium. So in general, there was only one price, one trading mechanism posted. In auction setup, you could have ex post price dispersion, but that's ex post just because people showed up and then they bid. You could get the actual price depending on the number of people showed up. But there's no dispersion mechanism posted. Now think about the sort of other extreme that focuses on stage 2 without stage 1. So there's no directed search anywhere, but there are noise matching. The paper I have in mind is this old paper by Burdett and Judd, 1983 in Econometrica. There, a buyer may receive, a fraction of buyers may receive more than one offers. So there is this second stage, there's noise matching, but there's no directed search there. There you do get dispersion. Yeah, I mean, different sellers can post different prices. But typically, once you add, competitive entry on the seller side, which the model doesn't have, you don't usually get efficiency. So there's this conflict between, some feature that we see, like price dispersion or dispersion in offered mechanisms, and the efficiency kind of stuff. Somehow the literature offers either this or that, but there's nothing that offers you to think about somewhere that's closer to reality and yet provides a meaningful discussion or analysis between these two parts, efficiency and price or mechanism dispersion. In terms of empiricists, I think people think, oh, some people, not all people, and certainly I hope not most of the people who work on search, people who usually did not work on search tend to think, oh, because the widespread use of internet search, price dispersion should come down drastically. We look at empirical evidence that's far from truth. Yeah, price distribution might have come down for certain categories of goods and services, but the use of internet did not really reduce it, although it didn't increase it either, but it didn't reduce it. So if we think such friction is the fundamental thing that's actually driving price dispersion, how come this increased efficiency in actually getting these things, price quotes and so on, did not really reduce price dispersion? I don't know whether what's going to happen with the widespread use of Zillow. Zillow is actually providing more services than just providing price quotes. It's actually providing you another option of actually purchasing your house with some quotes. So Zillow itself is a buyer of the house from you and then try to sell to some other people. So it's not exactly just providing price information. So this is the first category. This is a kind of uneasy relationship between efficiency and dispersion that we see in the literature. But if you want to actually extend it, you might say, well, yeah, I mean, typically people don't have either purely directed search or pure noise matching, so we need the two. Well, that in itself is not the precise motivation of this paper, because there are other papers in the literature that allow people to either choose to go to market to directly search or to go to some other market to do undirected search. There, the word sequential is becoming the important distinction. There's nothing sequential about this choice between directed and undirected search. It's simultaneous. Yeah, you either choose to go A or B. So I want to actually stick to this, sequentially mixed search, which is the important part. Now, I think it's pretty useful to understand this kind of process. The other issue that I really have in mind, which to some people may be even more interesting or important, is this relationship between price dispersion and search effort or search intensity. I mean, this goes way beyond, I think, search theory. So the idea is, or the question is this: okay, price dispersion exists because people don't have enough information, so they search. So, but why do you want to search? Why don't you just count on other people to search? Yeah, search somehow is a strategic substitute among buyers. If other buyers are searching very heavily, that's going to compress price dispersion. You just wait for that to happen. Why do you want to do the part to search? So there's this kind of intrinsic conflict that goes into information economics. But I'm not going to have private information. But that's the direction that I think this. Once you had dispersion coming out of the sequentially mixed research, then we can talk more about whether someone would want to incur the cost to acquire information or to increase such effort. So this is the second part of the paper that actually motivated me or induced me to use the phrase aggregate demand management in the previous version of the paper. But it's still in this part of the paper. If I have time, I will go through that second part of the paper. But first of all, I want to actually tell you what the model is and try to see whether this is interesting. Then, I mean, that I think would be enough to be taken into many other different fields.
Sure. I think it's really interesting, but it sounds to me like a big mystery. So I'm really looking forward to see the resolution of how you resolve all these things, because I have a hard time following.
Oh, I'm sure you have a hard time following because you have.
I'm slow in the mind, but what can I do?
No, you may be predispositioned thinking about the model as something else. But I would have a slide that would be a little bit clearer. So the important thing is that this process is different from many other processes in the literature, maybe contrary to what you think already have in mind. So
Shouyong, I have a question about motivation, but feel free to postpone it until you introduce the model.
Okay.
So basically, the mechanism for the price dispersion in your model is kind of mixed strategies used by whatever sellers. And coming back to your real estate example, for this mechanism to work, you have to be able to use mixed strategy. So you have to be able to kind of commit to. So for example, if you have to commit to the price as opposed to price distribution or the reserve price, then you are not able to use mixed strategy because you kind of post the price in advance.
A short answer is no, that's not the case. It's mixing at the market level, but not mixing at the individual sellers level. Individual sellers are using pure strategy. That's just a typical purification.
I see.
So, okay, the kind of main results is that it does construct a tractable model. In fact, the algebra is pretty straightforward. Nothing really fancy, despite my use of all these other terms like auctions and stuff. The model is actually very tractable. I mean, in fact, kind of embarrassingly easy to work with. In contrast, especially in comparison with the many other models out there. The second, the set of results of the following. First, not very surprising because it does have this second stage, which is noise matching that existed in Penn and Judd's paper. There will be a continuous price distribution, of course, non-degenerate distribution. But it's different from Penn and Judd precisely because the existence of the first stage, which has directed search. What directed search does is to regulate the size of the price dispersion. And also, in the absence of endogenous search effort, the equilibrium is actually socially efficient with this competitive entry of, let's say, sellers. Now, if you increase so-called meeting efficiency. I shouldn't use matching efficiency. If you increase the rate at which people meet with each other, for example, as a result of increased use of the internet search, you can actually widen the price dispersion instead of reducing it. It may sound positive, but we're going to come back to it. But this is probably a little bit of suspense. So finally, if I introduce endogenous search effort, the equilibrium is not efficient anymore. In some sense, it's just too much search. So you need to actually have a bunch of policies to restore inefficiency, a combination of subsidy and taxes. So this is, I think these 3 bullet points kind of go back to map into these issues that I started with. So, I mean, some of you may be listed here. Some of you may not have been listed here. If your name didn't show up in this list, I apologize. I mean, I'm sure the field is growing, so more people are going to be not showing up on the list. Anyway, so the environment, I'm going to start with as a simple environment as possible, because the goal is to have a simple model that actually contains this sequentially mixed search. So the model is going to have a one-period economy, and most of us know how to extend this to infinite horizon. So one-period economy is not really such a big deal. There will be a continuum of homogeneous individuals on each side. So I'm going to give labels, which I think is more descriptive for the general purpose. But people keep saying, well, why don't you use buyers and sellers, workers, firms? No, I don't want to, because it's supposed to be a little bit more generous. I mean, I had 3 examples here: houses, neighbors, and search online consumer market. So when you switch between these markets, what is a seller, what's a buyer? They're changing. So it's very confusing if you keep referring to buyers and sellers. And then you suddenly change into, say, from the consumer market into labor market. And then people on the 2 sides switched. So it's more confusing. So I'm going to just call one side stayers and the other side are visitors. If you want to map into these specific examples, in a goods market, for example, stayers are typically sellers, visitors are typically buyers. For the labor market, it's the reverse, because the stayers are the firms, which are buyers, and the visitors are workers who want to get a job. They are actually sellers. So what does a stayer do? A stayer would competitively enter some markets. The entry cost is K.
Shouyong, this is Randy. Can I make a small comment?
Yep.
The buyer stayer labels, they're useful for the reasons you suggest, but it indicates to me a little too much about moving across physical space when you could be doing this on the internet. I like the labels principals and agents in these models, where the principals post and the buyers, the searchers are the agents. But that's just an idea about terminology. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, it's a good point, because physically, yes, if we're all doing this stuff on the internet, no one is staying or moving around. That's true. So, but I don't want to use the principal agent, because it suggests that the private information somehow, or incentive stuff, is the key.
Well, right, but it's kind of easy to incorporate private information, as you know, and then the principal agent label is pretty accurate.
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
the fact that you can easily incorporate doesn't mean that is necessary as a basic model. So that has pros and cons. I mean, the use of that. So I'm welcome for other labels, but I really just don't want to confuse buyers and sellers all the time. In fact, when you teach a course on directed search, you often run into this problem of using the labels when you switch from consumer product into labor market. So the stayers are going to post prices. So this is a price posting model. And hence there's a commitment to whatever price you post. So I'm going to normalize the cost of production to 0 and goods are indivisible. A visitor has a fixed measure. So that's in contrast to stayers. Stayers, the measure is going to be determined by competitive entry, but the visitors is not. So it's a fixed measure. Each one would choose a supermarket to go into to meet someone. If there is a trade, the person gets a utility, well, drawing the surplus is Y. The value of not trading is 0. So it's 0 for both sides. So that's the setup. That's the description of these two sides. Now, what is sequentially mixed search? So stage 1 and 2, but now I have symbols to use, mathematical symbols. For the moment, I'm going to use the highest price in a supermarket. That's permissible. Plus another symbol called X to describe a supermarket. But this is really a shorthand because what's really there is the full distribution of posted prices. But later it will become very clear. That distribution is going to have to satisfy certain equilibrium requirement. And the only thing that what's the example of a supermarket here? I mean, I hate to go back to the goods market, but let's say it's a goods market. A supermarket is more like a catalog. You, as a seller or buyer, especially as a seller, you decide which catalog you want to put your item in. It's price posting. So the category says the highest price in this category is PH. But you can choose any price below that.
So Shouyong, could I have a question there? So this maximum price, yes, it's a bit hard to think to understand fully what it is. So
yeah, I'm just giving you an example.
Yes, but it's not so clear still. So that you have a catalog and then you can have a maximum price. Why don't you just have a single price or a minimum price? Or why is it exactly a max price?
Because people cannot direct search to particular individual sellers. So there is a category, there's a group, you can decide which group you want to put your stuff in. But
is it like a market maker here who is setting that max price? Should we think of it like that?
I mean, that's one way to understand it, but that shouldn't be the way, correct way to understand it. People choose which category to get into. But as any directed search, there has to be some element that you commit to in order to direct the search. You say, no, that's not true. I don't commit to anything, but I can direct the search. That's really BS. Nothing. All the models with directed search has one element in it that in some positive probability event that it will be triggered, they have to commit to that in that event. So whether that's auction, whether that's something else, the highest price is what I told you. You choose whichever you want to list your house, but the place you list may say, well, yeah, to facilitate
I understand that, but the reason why I ask is because this is important. So, but in your examples from internet auctions, for instance, do you have a maximum price there that is communicated?
For the internet price, for the internet search, of course, you can actually think about stuff like that. Different actually websites, they serve for different customers. They may actually charge different prices, fees for you to list. It gives perhaps different priorities to be listed in certain ways. But whether that's because you posted high price, it shows up there. But the fact is that the things that show up on the screen when you search are not random. I mean, it has some regularity depending on how, yes, anyway. I mean,
so yeah, is it that it is actually in each submarket there is a distribution of prices, but you're just using the highest price to represent the distribution, right?
Yes, it's not using it to represent, because other parts you don't need a commitment to. If this highest the price you have to commit to. If you, let's say a seller in the goods market, when you get into that market, when you try to list your stuff in another market, you pick a price to list, but that price cannot exceed what is I mean, rational expectation is more. It's not that any market maker is saying that this is the price you cannot exceed. I mean, it's just as an equilibrium concept that anything is supported by people's rational expectations. That's the market that people think the highest the price in it won't exceed this number pH.
Can I ask you another question in this regard?
Yep.
If you wanted price dispersion in a, I mean, I guess in the end you will tell us what price dispersion we're going to get, whether we got a price dispersion in pH or whether we get price dispersion in P. I can see that we probably get price dispersion in P. I'm not sure whether we're going to get price dispersion in pH. But I was wondering how much different is if I just wanted price dispersion within a sub-market, right? There's all these papers on auctions, in fact, right? You set a reserve price or something, and then people bid, and obviously there will be a whole lot of price dispersion because people will. So,
Philip, next slide maybe I'll go back to your point. I understand where you came from, but I would say that's a misunderstanding to start with. But I will come back to that. I have to finish describing these two stages.
Okay. Can I ask one question? It's kind of related, I guess, to what Espen asked about, because I guess a lot of the motivation was about realism, right? I mean, you were kind of saying, when I look for a house, I go on Zillow or whatever, and I get to pick, I want to look for a house between X and Y. So should we think of the max price or these price regions as coming from outside, like Zillow decides, or I mean, I guess that's related to what Espen was saying. Should we think about it like a market maker setting these up, or are these come out of the model endogenously?
Well, Zillow is a different example. That's what I said. But I mean, for the internet search, I don't know which specific feature people are actually confused with. Here is not that people, as a seller, I post the price and say, I won't actually accept anything above pH. That's not what they are posting. A seller is posting one number, which is the price.
No. So I understood
they have
that.
To choose. Well, it's like the seller is choosing a decision to say, oh, which website should I actually post this price? Let's suppose that different websites, as this is expected to have different pH, and they just choose which website to be, subscribe. The price quotes in. But that price, and the commitment is that, different categories or different list is only bounded by this highest price, which could be different, of course. I mean, short answer to Philip's question, of course, in this setup environment where the homogeneous people, you're only going to have one submarket showing up in the equilibrium, which means the equilibrium has only one pH value. So in fact, in the equilibrium, every seller, everyone is in one market. So it would become, moot to say, well, I'm actually ending up having, one pH in some cases, another pH, but a different stuff with different pH will show up if you have a heterogeneity.
I see. So in the equilibrium here, there's only going to be, everyone's going to be searching the same submarket.
Yeah, of course. We know very well that in order to get that to be equilibrium, we have to restrict what people think might happen if they actually try to actually get into a potentially different market.
No, I was just trying to map the environment back to some of the examples.
Yeah, so in the case that Zillow has just one list in the end, but that list is understood to have a highest price. If you are trying to sell a house there, your price will be one number that cannot exceed this pH. Yeah. So
Shouyong,
yep.
Can I ask the question? In your example with real estate and in many markets, I can direct my search to a sub-market with a range of prices. Suppose if you allow for that, if I can direct my search to a prices between 100 and 101 or even 2 cents, what would happen to price dispersion then? Here
you can do, as I already said earlier, I'm using this pH here as a description of the sub-market as a simplifying the terms. What it really should be there is the entire distribution. I mean, price range is just another feature of the price dispersion. Whether you pose a range, whether you actually commit to a range or commit to a highest price, in the end, in this model, the outcome is the same because the lowest price has no binding force. Because the second stage is noise matching, so whatever the lowest price, well, if it's lower than the equilibrium one, it's not going to be optimal.
What I meant is that you say that, of course, I cannot direct my search to individual stairs, but if I can direct my search to a narrow enough subset of them, those who post their prices.
What I'm saying is that you can do that in this model. And in the end, no one is going to specify the lower bound of the price to be actually higher than what's going to show up as the lower bound in the equilibrium here. Okay. What you said is possible. You can actually allow the both sides to specify in that way. But it's just that.
Shouyong, sorry to interrupt you. And
not the equilibrium outcome.
I just wanted to remind you that you're now 37 minutes through your hour.
I know, so I need, thank you very much.
Just to keep an eye on the time.
Yeah, so what is this then? The X is a meeting rate, a pass-on rate for a visitor to meet one, quote. The other side, the meeting rate is lambda, that's a function of X, and the two have to be consistent with respect to a meeting function. So a meeting function is M that depends on the number of people on the two sides, stairs and visitors. And you can just easily use a constant returns to scale to derive the relationship between lambda and X. And theta is the market tightness, is the ratio of stairs to visitors. So pH is the highest price. And I mean, you really should just think this is the only commitment they need to have. So, but a stayer can post any price at or below this pH once choosing to get into this supermarket. And once the person posted this price, of course, is committed to this price. There's no bargaining. Although in the same supermarket, there may be some other price higher than this particular P posted by this seller. So in stage 2, there's a noise matching with multiple meetings. So because a visitor is going to meet potentially more than one stayers, so get more than one price quote, or will actually choose to select the lower price because it's posted price. There's no bargaining. But if you got two prices, one is lower than another one, you're going to choose the lower one and then teach the higher price. So visitor receives meetings randomly. A match, the word match refers to a trade. So the M here is a meeting function. The matching function, which is the number of trades, that's going to be endogenous, although the meeting function is exogenous. So in this way, I left open the possibility that a stayer may also meet one-on-one visitors. Actually, I did work out that extension, but the analytics are less clear, and in the end, you need to actually do some numerical computation. But just to set up the model is not that difficult. So to simplify, I'm going to reinterpret lambda to be the meeting probability, not the meeting rate, which means that I'm assuming that a stayer receives either 0 or 1 meeting. So in contrast to a visitor, as I said, this is not, it's a restriction. It's going to simplify the analytics, but in terms of big ideas, it's not really a lot. You can have many to many meetings. Here is one to many. So an important feature of this process is that search is directed by a distribution of posted price, not by a price or a price mechanism posted by each stayer. Because a visitor does not know which stayer is posting what price when the person tries to enter a supermarket. So it's directed, but not pinpoint to what price posted by each seller. So here comes to try to partially address, hopefully partially address Philip Kierkegaard asked. So this contrasts to other two-stage search process. For example, competing auctions has 2 stages. First, you directly search for an auction, and second, when people showed up, they bid. So there's 2 stages. Or you, as Manolis and Philip worked out in 2009, which is a great paper. It has 2 stages too, because in the first stage, a worker can actually send, an exogenous number of offers out, potentially more than 1, but it's fixed. And then when the offers came, they select, which sounded similar, but is actually quite different, because their model is just purely directed search model. Purely directed search in precisely what I mentioned, what I said here. When a worker is searching for, it's deciding where to send the applications to, that worker knows exactly the relationship between each offer and the meeting probability, which is not the case here in the SaMMF. In the SaMMF, I only know there will be this distribution of prices in that market. My choice is whether to get into that market. I do not know which stayer in that market is offering what price. So I cannot possibly make a trade-off between the price that a person offers and the meeting probability. So despite this similar stuff, like a 2-stage process, the 2 examples I listed here should be just interpreted as a purely directed search, because there is exactly the same trade-off as in some other markets. Of course, they're different in the details of how many applications they can send out, as in this portfolio choice case, or which auction I participate. So this is really the key difference.
Just a clarifying question, Shouyong, what determines how many offers I get in the 2nd stage?
Is X, which is, depending on the market tightness. So this is endogenous. This Poisson meeting rate. Yeah, it's stochastic. So the X is the Poisson rate of these meetings. So you get a 1 with a certain probability, 2 with some other probability, and so on. That's the Poisson process. It's endogenous. That's critical. It's endogenous because the NS, the measure of stayers entering that market, is going to be determined by competitive entry. And people.
Just one thing, Shouyong, there. So you said that the stayer is like the seller. And usually you think that it is the seller that gets a sort of a number of customers that is Poisson distributed. So here you have turned it around, haven't you? Is there a reason for doing that?
What is? I didn't really
That's
catch
the Burdett-Judd part, Espen.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Burdett-Judd part of the model, though. One agent can see multiple quotes to the other side.
Not exactly, I would say. So usually, yeah. Okay, you don't have that much time to just continue. We can take it after.
But sorry, Shouyong, I'm still not understanding this entirely. So you have this rate, you bump into a stayer, and then without any time cost or delay, you can choose to accept or not and bump into another stayer.
No, they all they all came basically at the same time. You either get 0, 1, 2, 3, or whatever number according to this process X, and then you choose which one.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah.
So Shouyong, could we think of these actual quoted prices as ex post bidding, where the stayers are?
No,
but what I mean is bidding without knowing how many people they're bidding against.
No, I don't want to actually think in that way. It's not, as I already said, by putting this literature with the competing auctions there. The key difference is not whether there is price dispersion ex post. The difference is whether there is dispersion imposed in the mechanisms. So you can have competing auctions. I mean, you're working on some of these models too. You can have degenerated distribution in auctions posted in an equilibrium, but dispersion prices coming out after bidding. That's not really capturing what I'm trying to say. I already repeated it quite so many times. Anyway, I probably have only 10 minutes left. So, and we need to actually have some concrete juice coming out of this. So think about a stayer's decision. So suppose, I mean, doing the backward induction, doing the reverse calculation, think about that a stayer already had a meeting, met someone, but doesn't know whether the visitor actually had some other meetings. So what is the expected surplus the stayer is getting? Well, this particular stayer is posting price P and met a visitor. And this stayer knows that that exact visitor could possibly have other meetings. And moreover, these other meetings may actually have a price lower than what this particular stayer offers. Well, the probability of that is F. Yeah, that's the CDF of the offer distribution. Someone else that the visitor met is offering a lower price than what you're offering. In that case, the visitor is going to take that offer instead of yours. And the probability for that happening is X times F. The rate at which that happens is X times F, because X is the rate at which that visitor can meet somebody else. So the probability that this does not happen is the exponential of the minus the rate, a typical way to calculate it. Now go back at one stage and say, okay, the stayer tries to choose a price to post, the P, knowing that if there is a meeting, the expected surplus is this much. Well, what's the price to be choosing to post? Well, to maximize this expected surplus. Yeah, subject to the constraint that it cannot actually try to post the price higher than the highest price allowed in this supermarket. So if you're going to enter this supermarket that's constrained by this upper bound pH, well, any price posted there has to generate the same expected profit pi. So this pi, for all the pricing in the support of the offer distribution, has to yield exactly the same expected profit needle pi. This is Burdett-Judd actually. So the stayers now going back yet one more stage, the entry decision is whether I want to enter this particular market characterized by a distribution F. I mean, I shorten that notation to a highest price, but should it be just the F? Well, this is a standard kind of a restriction. Yeah. If this pi x is greater or equal to k, then there will be stayers keep entering until the extra profit is actually wiped out. Now, for all x such that this pi x is less than k, there's no entering. No one is going to enter. Both have to be, I mean, both are needed, especially in the first part. It looks very simple as a zero profit condition, but you know it contains both restrictions in the equilibrium and off the equilibrium, because this has the hold for all x, that the pi x is greater or equal to k, not just for the x that's going to show up in the equilibrium. There will be only one equilibrium value of x, but the restriction says for all x that pi x is at least k, this has to be the case. So this eventually pins down the tightness function. So a vista is doing similar stuff. It's trying to say which submarket to enter. So the submarket to enter, if the vista enters a particular submarket, the probability of getting a price lower or at P is 1 minus the probability I just used in the calculation of the stayers profit function. So this is kind of what I actually don't know the word for this. It's not a CDF, but it's like a incomplete or part of the CDF. Anyway, you integrate the surplus of the vista y minus P with respect to this, distribution. That's the vista's expected surplus. Now there's no free entry of vistas. So vistas, the number of vistas is fixed. So the vista is simply choosing a submarket X to enter, understanding that all this probability will depend on the offer distribution in that submarket. So this is the stage one. This choice, if you really want to pin down mathematically to what is directed search, is this choice problem, which is absent in embedded JAD. Here, they choose which submarket to enter by choosing X. Of course, it's not just choosing X. The X comes with a distribution of prices. So by entering this market X, there will be this particular distribution F of posted prices. There will be a noise margin in the second stage, so that's going to come out. So I know here I say people know how pH depends on X, but actually what they know is that the entire distribution depends on X in whatever the rational expectation way. All right, so I make some assumptions on the matching functions are typically satisfied by all the good examples. And the entry cost of a stairs is not outrageously high, so there has to be some surplus for the two sides. Then one result is that a unique, sequentially mixed search equilibrium exists. I mean, there's only one equilibrium, which is going back to what I said here. There's only one active submarket in the equilibrium. And you can characterize the distribution function very easily. It comes actually from the equal profit condition on the stayer side. So this is what I said earlier. Although when people choose which submarket to enter, it's the relationship between the distribution F and the X that they take into account for the directed search. But almost all parts of this F is pinned down by this condition, the indifference condition on the stayer side. What is left is actually this pH. The pH needs commitment. Everything else don't need a commitment. I mean, you let them go into this submarket, they choose a price to post. They can choose whatever price to post, but they can't post higher than pH. So So for the expected surplus of a visitor, you can calculate similarly.
Sorry, Shouyong, I'm just a clarification. I might have missed it, and maybe it's in the definition of equilibrium. Where is the optimization program where the pH is chosen? You know, like in a typical competitive search model where you post price with rational expectation about what's going to happen in the stock market later on.
So as they choose which submarket to go into, also understanding the relation between F and the X, the meeting rate. They can choose whichever price they post. The submarket are these labels posted and say, here, this is the distribution. The distribution includes, of course, all features of the distribution. One of the features is the support. What I'm trying to say is that there's no need for people to say, oh, when I go into this submarket, I'm committed not to post the price lower than, say, the lower bound. That is not necessary because they will rationally choose not to post anything lower than this pH. But is this one, the PL, but it's the pH that needs commitment.
Yeah.
Once you enter submarket, you commit, you're not going to post the price higher than pH. That is just a commitment. That's the choice, if you want to put it in that way. It's an entering decision. There are all these submarkets, and each one has a distribution, including the specification of the support of prices you can post, and you choose which one to get into. But once you get into, that's what the commitment says, you cannot post the price higher than pH. So maybe I should just explain why this pH is so important. Everything else of this price distribution, F, they are simply given by this condition here, the indifference condition on the stayer side. The reason why pH needs commitment is that imagine a stayer got into one submarket without a commitment to not posting higher than pH. The person would say, well, what if I post a price that's epsilon higher than this is supposed the highest price? That person is going to make a higher expected profit. Why? Because the meeting rate does not depend on the price you post. The meeting rate depends on which submarket you get into, which is the distribution of prices there. Everybody understands it's the same distribution of prices once you get into that submarket. So the
sorry, I just wanted to remind you that now there's officially 2 minutes left, but since we've had some good discussion already, feel free to go a little bit into the discussion period. But it was still good to leave some time for open discussion as well.
This is the key. I want to finish explaining this one. Maybe after this slide, we can do whatever we want. But because so many questions was centered around this pH, why do you need a commitment? Well, you need a commitment for directed search. Why is this pH so important? Because, you know, a stayer contemplating posting a higher price in the submarket would have the same meeting probability. Yeah, the meeting probability doesn't depend on the particular price you post in submarket. Depends on the submarket, but doesn't depend on the meeting probability, the particular price you post. Well, the acceptance probability, if you compare pH with slight price higher than pH, is the same, because the only visitor who are going to accept either price is that there's no lower price. So the acceptance probability is the same. So you got two prices with the same trading probability, but one has a higher, you know, expected profit. So that's why there is an incentive for ex post to deviate to posting slightly higher price than pH. You cannot allow that. I mean, commitment has to have some bite. So that's the commitment. But here, why would a stayer commit to not posting high H? Well, it goes back to directed search, because visitors value the trade-off between, meeting someone and the surplus. And this trade-off is kind of determined by what people anticipate is going to come out. A different pH is associated with different distribution of prices. That comes with different X. And there's only one combination that is optimal to a visitor. So that's why you need a commitment. Okay. So maybe I should just stop here because, there are so many questions about the pH, and I hope that, this is why you need a commitment. Alrighty, so should we just switch into more discussions?
Up to you. So if you're opening the floor to questions, then yes, please, everybody ask your questions. And attendees, again, you're reminded that if you use the raise hand feature, we will call on you.
I just have one comment. I think this is very interesting. But so basically what you have is that the max price is a one-to-one correspondence between the price, expected the price the visitor will pay, and pH. So, and then as long as you have that.
Yes, Brian, what you said is absolutely right, but not precise. There is a one-to-one mapping between the entire offer distribution F and X. It's right here.
Yes.
I already solved the inverse of the F.
So my point was just that this you would think this holds generally, as long as you have just one instrument that you can govern the expected terms of trade with, then you will get efficiency. So I guess sort of you can think of this, that it's possible to generalize.
Again, yes, Brian, that's kind of intuitive, but not precise. Why don't you say I commit to the PL? No, that doesn't work. There's no need to commit to PL.
No, that was not my
point.
So
it's not just, in general, it's not true that if there's something I can commit to, I got efficiency. No, it has to be a very particular thing. Because other features of the distribution, they are pinned down by the indifference condition of stairs entry. And they don't need any commitment. It's the pH. I already explained to you here. That's why.
I very much agree, and I think it's very interesting. What I just say is that I would think that you could sort of do it even more general, as long as you can commit to this maximum price. Then you can.
I'm trying to explain
almost
to you.
Everything that will happen ex post will be possible.
I'm trying to explain to you what you said is incorrect. If you really want to be, forgive me for being a bit too straightforward. What you claim is incorrect. I can have two supermarkets with the identical expected price, but differ in the pH. Certainly one is going to show up in the equilibrium, another one will not. So just commit to expected price is not going to work.
No, I didn't say that. I meant to be positive. I think it's interesting. And I was just thinking that you could get these results even more, you could get it more to generalize. So yes.
How do you want to generalize?
No, I was thinking that maybe that you could have, so that you could have even more general pricing games ex post in the second stage, and you will still get it. As long as there will be a one-to-one correspondence between the price structure that you get ex post and the pH, you will get the result.
I would have liked to have a generalization, but as I said, to the level, to the way, way you described, it's not exactly right. Yes, there are generalization. For example, one simple generalization is that instead of posting prices, the supermarket now is characterized by a set of auctions with reserve price. So people can post auctions instead of prices. And then what's corresponding to the pH is the lowest reserve price you can post. In that case, you're going to get a dispersion of auctions that differs in the reserve price potentially. That's how I would think generalization in the direction you suggested, but not in the way you said. I mean, if you are restricting to posting prices, then this is the one. There's no other one. I mean, this is already very general. I mean, you tell the stayer, I'm not going to require you to commit to posting one particular value for the price. I mean, that's kind of bad way to explain. You can choose whatever price you want to post, but the only restriction is that your posted price cannot exceed this pH. That's the only thing. Okay, so
Shouyong,
I have to go back to the two, I have to go back to these two stages and say, what does it buy us? You know, the one thing that you get in different from, you know, Vedette Jad is that the highest price is strictly below the maximum price, which is Y, the monopoly price. The reason is that there is meeting friction. And the proof is actually just two lines that I have here. It comes from, you know, seller's entry or stayer's entry and visitor's optimality of choosing the X. But the more general thing is that Vedette Jad, there's only the second part, which is noise matching, but there is no directed search. People actually can't choose which sub-market they want to get into. With the noise matching, what you get is exactly what I explained here. I mean, there's no choice between which market to get into, and hence a stayer is not doesn't have to be concerned about a visitor's choice about which market to get into. So it would just you know, post the highest price will be the monopoly price, just to count on this low probability event that the visitor he gets doesn't have any other one. In this case, gets, you know, a big deal out of that trade. Okay, is my time up?
No, you have.
Well, we're in the open Q&A, so please, whatever questions there are, this is the time to discuss them.
Yep. Shouyong, can I ask you a question?
Yep.
Yeah. So the part that I think is interesting here is that in this kind of looking at your second stage on O, which I guess is close to Butters, the seller or stayer, I guess, who sets the highest price will only get to sell his good if he is in a monopoly situation, if his customer has no alternative. So that's the time where he can extract the most surplus. So in this sense, the first stage where and I guess that sort of interprets well why that's the only sort of restriction that matters in the posting of the first stage. So I guess one way to interpret then the first stage is that there's a market maker that sort of ensures or, you know, offers some sort of insurance to the customers that they're not going to get, you know, there is a higher price that they will need to pay even if they have no alternative. So under this interpretation, perhaps, I was wondering, would it make more sense, at least from an efficiency point of view, to examine the effects of heterogeneity on the customer side, in the sense that, so suppose there's some customers who would be unwilling to pay that monopoly price. That would create an inefficiency, which might occur in equilibrium, but which the market maker himself might be able to resolve by setting a maximum price. Meaning that you only have the second stage, some people might be priced out even if it were efficient to trade with them, but the market maker might actually endogenously sort of offer a price cap, which would make everybody trade in equilibrium.
Well, the heterogeneity is interesting, but if it's ex-ante heterogeneity, which means it's a heterogeneity that exists before people get into the submarket, then what you're going to have, let's say there are two types of visitors. Yeah. What you're going to get is that there will be two submarkets in the equilibrium. One has a different APH than the other one. You're not going to get the mix that you're trying to suggest. Just imagine with these two different types, the first stage, the trade-off between the submarket and the X will be different for them. Let's hope there's a single crossing condition, I mean, feature of this with respect to this heterogeneity. Then, yeah, what you're going to have is two different submarkets in the equilibrium instead of one. And it will be selected, self-selected.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
Yeah, you can see that, yeah, which is kind of different from what you did with the Philippe on this, multiple applications. There, because you only have directed search, you don't have this noise matching part. So, although the way you directed search is allow people to choose a portfolio of, let's say, different level of risk of getting the offer. But people know exactly in that trade-off which seller, which firm is providing what price for the trade-off. You can pinpoint directly to that particular firm. Here you can't.
Yeah, thanks.
So you have a question. In the introduction, you were talking about some result of price dispersion increasing when the contact probability is higher.
Okay.
You want to say something about that quickly?
Yeah, thank you very much. I have to ask the organizer, are we overusing the time, or can we actually?
No, the Q&A time is until 10:15 officially, and we can go on as long as you guys want to keep talking.
Until midnight. Okay, so yeah. So here's, so I alluded to this, a bunch of evidence by Michael Bay. Actually, it's a paper written by him and a student that I kind of involved in the supervision at Indiana. So think about increased use in internet and so on as an increase in this parameter A in the meeting function. So instead of M as the meeting function between stayers and visitors, let's put this parameter A in front of it. And let's increase this A. And then work out the equilibrium and see how the price distribution in the equilibrium will change. So, this is just working through, but one thing that you're going to have naturally is that you increase the meeting, you're increasing the meeting efficiency. Now the visitors are going to choose a submarket that has a higher meeting rate. This X, which is the Poisson rate of meeting for visitors. So that's going there. This is a part of the outcome of choice. Yeah, they're going to, instead of just go into any submarket, they're going to go into a submarket that has a higher X. That's the essential feature of directed search, which you don't have in embedded chart. But here, because this first stage is directed search, although it's directed by distribution, but still you want to select a market with a different distribution now. The market tightness also goes up because, given the same margin probability, the stayers give the same, how do I put it? Anyway, the margin probability for the seller may also go up in some way. So there's more entry of stayers. So what's going to happen? So the price dispersion is going to increase, widen. Let's say you measure price dispersion by the coefficient of variation. The price level may also respond, but the standard deviation increases relative to the expected value of the prices. So price dispersion widens unambiguously if you measure price dispersion by the coefficient of variation, although you need an extra condition if you just look at the spread, the highest versus the lowest price. But although
it's somewhat novel, Shouyong, but just Ricardo, I'm surprised you don't know that this result holds in many models like Burdett-Judd. If the arrival,
no, of course I do. In the two extremes, you get monopoly or competitive, so it's degenerate in the middle. But I wanted to see if there's anything different here.
You can see I perfectly anticipated this comment from Randy. Look at this slide. So go back to Burdett-Judd 83. There, there's something like this median efficiency, although not exactly the same. So let's call that alpha. What's alpha in embedded JOT? Is the fraction of buyers who receive 2 offers or more, as opposed to just 1 offer. If now think about 3 different cases. One is, in the case the offer is just a number. So if you set it to 0, that means every buyer receives at most 1 offer. In that case, the only equilibrium price is the monopoly price, for the reason I just gave you before. Why in that case there's a possible incentive to deviate by increasing the highest price. So you get a 0 dispersion in prices. Now you go to the opposite extreme. Alpha is equal to 1. So every buyer receives at least 2 offers. In that case, you also get a 0 dispersion because it's just a Bertrand competition on every possible seller. So you get monopoly price. So you get a 0 dispersion on the 2 ends. And then if you move anywhere in the middle, when alpha is between 0 and 1, suddenly you get a non-degenerate dispersion. So the dependence of price dispersion on alpha is hump-shaped, embedded JOT. You don't get this here. You only get monotonic dependence. The reason is, again, goes back because people choose X. So, I mean, if you want an informal understanding or comparison or connection between the two, is that with the directed search, the equilibrium is basically restricted. It's going to, not restricted, it's going to occur only on the left part of this range of embedded JOT. So what's the connection? The alpha equal to 0 is similar to the case X is 0. In the sense that if X is 0 in my model, every stayer, the visitor they meet has 0 probability of having another stayer. X equal to infinity is like alpha equal to 1. Every stayer who has met a visitor, that visitor also has another stayer. So somehow the equilibrium is not arbitrary as in embedded JOT. Anything can happen depending on, going from alpha equal to 1 equal to 0 to, let's say, a third, you get price dispersion increasing with alpha. And then let's say from a third to 1, you get decreasing. So depending on which part you are in embedded JOT. Here, no, you only get the first part, precisely because both the stayers and the visitors choose which X market to get into.
So Shouyong, if you endogenize the meeting rate in embedded JOT in some way, like maybe a free entry, fixing the level of profit, do you think that would change?
Very you can have entry, but it's whether you have directed search. Embedded JOT, you cannot do a directed search at all. So some people, when I actually present this paper first, they say, oh yeah, you're just introducing directed search in the embedded JOT. Try to go back to embedded JOT, how you're going to do directed search. Nothing, 0. There's not even a single element in the price distribution that's left for you to use for directed search. The highest price is equal to Y. Here, the highest price is the one to do the directed search. You commit to it. So you you kind of signal to the visitors, okay, I'm getting into this sub-market where the price is capped at the pH. All the prices posted in the sub-market are not higher than this pH. This gives the trade-off between meeting probability and the price distribution. Embedded JOT, the highest price is already pinned down. Everything, in fact, is already pinned down. So you don't have anything left for directed search. A lot of people don't actually know this, but once they actually took like 30 minutes to walk through embedded JOT, and they understand it very quickly. There's no way to do directed search. Yes, you can do, you can still allow entry, but you cannot allow directed searching better judge. Simply, there's nothing left for you to model directed search. Isn't this really? I mean, I didn't try to get into that. Unless people know the better judge model, they want to be able to appreciate this kind of a bizarre outcome that you cannot just superimpose directed search onto better judge. There's just no way for you to do it.
So while I agree that it's not completely obvious how to add directed search under Burdett-Judd, I'll just point out that in the original 83 paper, they do endogenize both alpha and the highest price. Right. So they endogenize alpha through this simultaneous search game where people choose how many people to visit at the same time. And then they can endogenize the highest price through a sequential search game where I can choose whether or not to search again. And so I agree, they do it in a different way, kind of like an 80s way where they have these two different cost parameters, the cost of sequential search and the cost of simultaneous search. So it's not directed search. And it was kind of before all the directed search existed. But they do endogenize both of these things.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. That's why I was very careful. I said you can actually endogenize that alpha, but it's just not, you cannot do directed search in better chart. Yes, that's the exact statement. It's no problem to actually allow entry and endogenous alpha in better chart. That's possible. Yeah, because you got some arbitrary profit on the seller side, so you can just introduce competitive entry to wipe out that profit and hence endogenous alpha. But it's not that they are actually, by doing that endogenous entry, it's not that they are actually doing this directed search. People are actually explicitly taking into account when they decide which submarket to get into. They understand there is this link between alpha and the price dispersion they are going to encounter.
All right, thank you so much. At this point, I think I'll end the official part of the webinar. I'll stop the recording right here.